The scent of jasmine and wolf musk hung thick in the ceremonial hall, a combination that should have been intoxicating, but instead made my stomach turn. I pressed myself against the stone wall near the servants' entrance. Silver tray clutched against my chest like a shield, watching as another wave of eligible women filed past me. Their gowns whispered secrets across marble floors, silks from the Eastern Territories. Velvets dyed in colors I couldn't name. Jewels that caught the firelight and threw it back in defiant sparkles. I was invisible to them, just another piece of furniture in a room designed to showcase beauty and power. The mating ceremony happened once every decade, when the Alpha King opened his court to unmated females from every pack across the territories. It was supposed to be an honor, a chance at a life most could only dream of. The females who'd arrived over the past week had transformed the usually austere castle into something out of a fever dream. Everywhere I turned, there were flowers, perfumes, laughter that sounded like wind chimes in a storm. My role was simple: keep the wine flowing, the plates full, and my eyes down. Especially my eyes down. More champagne on the Eastern tables, Greta hissed as she swept past me, her keys jangling at her belt. She was the head housekeeper, a woman whose face seemed carved from the same stone as the castle walls. And for heaven's sake, Mira, do something about your hair. You look like you've been dragged through a hedge. My hand went automatically to my pale blonde braid, which had indeed come partially undone during my frantic sprint from the kitchens. I tucked the loose strands behind my ear and nodded, not trusting my voice. Greta had a talent for finding fault, and tonight of all nights, I couldn't afford to give her ammunition. I'd been working in the castle for 3 years, ever since my mother's death left me with nothing but debts and a small room in the servants' quarters. It wasn't the life I'd imagined as a child, but it was survival. My mother used to tell me that survival was its own kind of courage, though I wasn't sure I believed her anymore. The great doors at the far end of the hall opened, and the crowd's energy shifted instantly, like a collective intake of breath, like the moment before lightning strikes. I didn't need to see to know what had caused it. The Alpha King had arrived. I risked a glance up from my position by the wall. Daemon Silvercrest stood at the entrance, and even from this distance his presence hit like a physical force. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes that I'd heard described as winter storm gray. He wore black, simple and severe, which somehow made him more imposing than if he'd been draped in crown jewels. Power radiated from him in waves, not the showy kind that needed announcement, but the quiet, absolute kind that made every wolf in the room recognize their superior. The females pressed forward, a tide of perfume and ambition. I watched their faces transform, eyes widening, lips parting, spines straightening. It was like watching flowers turn toward the sun, helpless and instinctive. I felt nothing. Well, that wasn't entirely true. I felt tired. I felt the ache in my feet from 12 hours of standing. I felt the burn of the too hot kitchen air still clinging to my skin. But that pull, that magnetic attraction that had every other woman in the room leaning toward him like he was gravity itself, that I didn't feel. Maybe there was something wrong with me. It wouldn't be the first time I'd failed to respond the way I was supposed to. Daemon's gaze swept the room, and for one impossible moment, I could have sworn it snagged on me. His eyes met mine across the sea of silk and jewels, across the space that separated servants from nobility, and something flickered in their depths. Surprise? Confusion? Then Greta's hand clamped on my shoulder, her nails digging through the thin fabric of my uniform. The Eastern tables, girl. Now. I ducked my head and hurried toward the service corridor, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't name. Behind me, I heard the master of ceremonies beginning his welcoming speech, his voice booming with practiced grandeur. This was it, the official beginning of the week-long ceremony that would end with the Alpha King choosing his mate, his queen, the woman who would rule beside him and bear the next generation of Silvercrest wolves. The kitchen was chaos incarnate. Cook was red-faced and shouting orders while her assistants scrambled to plate the next course. I grabbed fresh bottles of champagne, checked their temperature, and loaded them onto my tray with practiced efficiency. Did you see him? One of the kitchen girls, barely 16, clutched her chest dramatically. I swear my wolf nearly broke through just from being in the same room. How is anyone supposed to function? By doing their jobs, Cook snapped, but even she looked flushed. The Alpha King could make a stone fall in love, they say. Every unmated female for 3 territories has shown up, some mated ones too, if the rumors are true. I said nothing, just hefted my tray and pushed back through the service door. The ceremony hall had transformed in the few minutes I'd been gone. The females had arranged themselves in a careful display, like goods at a market. The boldest stood closest to where Damon now sat on a throne-like chair at the head of the room, while the shyer ones clustered in groups, whispering behind their hands. Pack dynamics were on full display. I could identify the alpha females by their confident stances, the betas by their strategic positioning, the omegas by how they pressed themselves small and unthreatening. I wove between them, refilling glasses with mechanical precision. Their conversations washed over me in fragments. He heard his last mate died in childbirth. Tragic, really. But it's been 5 years. Strongest alpha bloodline in the Northern Territories. Imagine the pups. But will he choose for love or for political alliance? My father says. Those eyes. Did you see those eyes? I would let him. I tuned them out, focusing on my task. Pour, smile politely, move on, don't make eye contact, don't engage, don't exist beyond the service you provide. But I could feel him watching. It was absurd, of course. Why would the Alpha King watch a servant when he had his pick of the most beautiful, accomplished, powerful females in the territories? Yet every time I glanced up, I found those storm gray eyes tracking my movement through the crowd. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. My wolf, usually so quiet she was barely there, stirred uneasily. I ducked into an alcove to rearrange my tray, using the moment to steady my breathing. Through the gap in the curtain, I could see Damon speaking with a stunning female in crimson, the daughter of the Southern Pax Alpha, if I remembered the gossip correctly. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm with casual familiarity. He smiled politely, but his eyes were cold. You're the one who doesn't feel it. I spun, nearly dropping my tray. A man stood behind me in the alcove, tall, lean, with copper hair and amber eyes that marked him as high-ranking. I recognized him from the castle staff briefings. Ezra Nightshade, the Alpha King's beta and closest advisor. I don't know what you mean, I said carefully, setting down the tray before my shaking hands betrayed me. Yes, you do. His voice was quiet, curious rather than accusing. Every unmated female in this room is drowning in pheromones right now. Some of the mated ones too. But you. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle. You're completely unaffected. My throat went dry. I'm just a servant. I know my place. That's not it. He stepped closer, and I caught his scent. Pine and rain, overlaid with the distinct signature of a powerful beta. You genuinely don't feel the pull. How is that possible? I had no answer for him. I'd been asking myself the same question since the moment Damon walked into the room. Every instinct I'd been born with should have been screaming at me to submit, to seek his approval, to compete for his attention. Instead, I felt nothing. Less than nothing. A strange, empty calm that made me feel more broken than I already was. Leave the girl alone, Ezra. Another voice. This one from the entrance to the alcove. She's just trying to do her job. We both turned. Damon Silvercrest stood framed by the curtain, and this close, the power radiating from him was almost suffocating. Almost. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Something between confusion and interest, like I was a book written in a language he'd never encountered. My apologies, Alpha, Ezra said smoothly, bowing his head. I was simply curious about, I know what you were curious about. Damon's eyes never left mine. Go manage the ceremony. I'll handle this. Handle this. As if I were a problem to be solved. Ezra departed with another bow, leaving me alone with the most powerful alpha in the territories. I should have been terrified. I should have been on my knees, throat bared, every submission instinct I possessed screaming at me to show deference. Instead, I met his eyes and said, Your champagne is getting warm. Something flashed across his face. Surprise again. But also something that might have been amusement. Is it? The bottles on the eastern tables. They'd been sitting out for 15 minutes. Champagne should be served at 45 degrees Fahrenheit. After that, it loses its quality. Why was I lecturing the Alpha King about champagne service? What was wrong with me? But he didn't look angry. He looked intrigued. You're Mira, he said, and the fact that he knew my name sent ice down my spine. The servant who reorganized the wine cellar last winter. I blinked. How do you... I notice things. He took a step closer, and I could smell him now. Cedar and smoke, wild and clean, utterly masculine. My wolf stirred again, but not with attraction, with something else. Recognition, maybe, or warning. You're not affected by me. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. No, Your Majesty. Why? I don't know. Are you mated? No. Promised to someone? No. Then why? His voice dropped lower, almost dangerous. Every female out there is half feral with wanting. But you stand here discussing champagne temperature like I'm furniture. I should have apologized. I should have made an excuse, fled, hidden in the kitchen until this nightmare ended. Instead, I heard myself say, maybe I'm broken. The words hung between us, more honest than I'd intended. Because that's what I'd always suspected, wasn't it? That some essential part of me had never formed correctly, that I was missing the pieces that would have made me normal, acceptable, whole. Damon stared at me for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he smiled. Not the polite, political smile he'd given the female in crimson, a real smile, with teeth and warmth, and something that looked almost like relief. Broken, he repeated, tasting the word. Or maybe you're the only honest thing in this entire circus. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted in the main hall. Raised voices, the crash of breaking glass. Damon's head snapped toward the sound, his entire demeanor shifting in an instant from curious to commanding. Stay here, he ordered, then strode through the curtain. I didn't stay. Of course I didn't. Instead, I grabbed my tray and followed at a careful distance, emerging into a scene of barely controlled chaos. Two females were facing each other in the center of the hall, both radiating aggression. One was the crimson-clad Southern Alpha's daughter. The other was a striking female with midnight hair and eyes like chips of green ice. From the Western Pack, I thought, though I couldn't remember her name. You dare touch him with such presumption, the dark-haired female snarled. He is an Alpha King, not some common pack leader to be pawed at. And you think your northern prudishness impresses him? Crimson Dress shot back. At least I know how to show interest, instead of standing around like a decorative ice sculpture. The tension in the room was suffocating. Other females had backed away, forming a circle around the combatants. This was how it started, I realized. The posturing, the challenges, the violence that simmered beneath every mating ceremony. Fighting for the Alpha's attention was as old as wolfkind itself. Damon stood at the edge of the circle, his face an unreadable mask. Ezra appeared at his side, murmuring something I couldn't hear. The Alpha King raised one hand, and the room fell silent. Enough. One word. Just one word, spoken in a tone that brooked no argument, and both females immediately dropped their eyes and backed away from each other. The power in his voice was absolute. Not cruel, but utterly unyielding. This ceremony is about choice, Damon continued, his gaze sweeping the assembled females. My choice, not yours. Fighting among yourselves won't impress me. It will only ensure you're sent home at first light. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Both females bowed their heads in submission, murmuring apologies. But I saw something else in that moment. I saw the weariness in Damon's eyes, quickly hidden. The slight tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched briefly at his sides before relaxing into careful composure. He hated this. All of it. The ceremony, the posturing, the females throwing themselves at him. He hated it as much as I would have if our positions were reversed. And somehow, that made him seem less like an untouchable king, and more like a man trapped in a role he never wanted. Our eyes met across the room again. This time, I didn't look away. Neither did he. The ceremony continued for another 2 hours, though it felt like days. I watched from the shadows as females paraded themselves before Damon, each trying to outdo the last with displays of grace, wit, or strategic flirtation. Some sang. One actually recited poetry. Another shifted partially, letting her wolf's eyes glow golden to showcase her bloodline's strength. Damon endured it all with the same carefully neutral expression, offering polite comments and nothing more. I refilled glasses, cleared plates, and tried to ignore the way my skin prickled, Every time his gaze found me in the crowd, it was nearly midnight when Greta finally dismissed the serving staff. My feet ached, my back screamed, and I smelled like a combination of wine, roasted meat, and other people's perfume. All I wanted was my small bed in the servants' quarters and 8 hours of unconsciousness. The castle's back corridors were blessedly quiet at this hour. Most of the staff had already retired, exhausted from the day's preparations and execution. I climbed the narrow staircase to the 3rd floor where the female servants were housed, my footsteps echoing off stone walls. Mira. I froze on the landing, hand gripping the railing. Ezra emerged from the shadows like he'd been waiting for me, which was impossible because how would he have known which route I'd take? Unless he'd been following me, which was a thought I didn't want to examine too closely. Beta Nightshade, I said carefully, executing a small bow. Is there something you need? Yes, actually. He moved closer, and in the dim lamplight, his amber eyes seemed to glow. I need you to understand what you've gotten yourself into. I haven't gotten myself into anything. I'm just a servant. You're the female who doesn't respond to an Alpha King's presence. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How impossible? He leaned against the wall, studying me. I've known Damon for 15 years. I've seen females literally faint from standing too close to him. Strong alphas, confident women with power of their own. They all crumble, but you? He shook his head. You look at him like he's just another person. Isn't he? The words were out before I could stop them. Ezra's eyebrows shot up, and then, surprisingly, he laughed. It was a genuine sound, warm and unexpected in the cold corridor. Oh, he's going to love you, Ezra said, more to himself than to me. Or you're going to drive him absolutely insane, possibly both. I don't understand what this has to do with me. The ceremony is for the noble females, the ones from powerful packs. I'm nobody. That's where you're wrong. Ezra's expression sobered. You became somebody the moment Damon noticed you. And trust me, Mira, he noticed. Which means everyone else will too. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the corridor's temperature. What are you saying? I'm saying be careful. The females here are desperate to become queen. They've spent their whole lives preparing for this chance, and if they think you're competition... He trailed off meaningfully. But I'm not competition. I'm not even participating in the ceremony. Doesn't matter what you want. It matters what they perceive. He pushed off from the wall, preparing to leave. Watch your back, Mira. These next few days are going to be dangerous in ways you can't imagine. He disappeared down the stairs, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. I stood there for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. This was absurd. I was a servant. I had no noble blood, no pack connections, no prospects beyond the daily grind of work that kept me fed and housed. The idea that I could somehow be competition for females who'd been groomed since birth to catch an alpha's eye was laughable. And yet... Ezra's warning gnawed at me as I finally made it to my room. The servants' quarters were cramped, 8 beds squeezed into a space meant for 4, with thin curtains offering the illusion of privacy. Most of my roommates were already asleep, their breathing creating a soft chorus in the darkness. I changed into my nightgown and slipped into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw storm gray ones staring back at me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken, for reasons I refused to examine. What was wrong with me? Why didn't I feel what every other female felt? I'd wondered this before, of course. At 18, when I'd attended my first pack gathering, and felt nothing while other young females giggled and preened around the alphas. At 20, when a perfectly nice beta from my mother's old pack had tried to court me, and I'd felt only a vague discomfort at his attention. At 22 now, working in a castle full of powerful wolves and feeling like I was made of different material entirely. Something that didn't quite fit the mold. My mother had always said I was special, that my pale hair and quiet nature marked me as different. But different in what way? Special how? She'd died before I could ask the questions that mattered. Sleep finally claimed me sometime before dawn, dragging me into dreams of stone corridors and gray eyes that saw too much. Morning came too early, announced by Greta's sharp voice and the clanging of the breakfast bell. I dressed quickly in my uniform, a simple gray dress with white apron, and joined the stream of servants heading to the kitchen for assignments. The castle was already buzzing with activity. Today was the first official day of courtship, where Damon would begin spending time with small groups of females, supposedly to get to know them better. In reality, it was a carefully choreographed dance of politics and presentation, with every moment scrutinized for signs of favor. "You're on breakfast service for the female guests," Greta informed me, thrusting a list into my hands. "East Wing, Rose Garden Terrace, and Mira," she fixed me with a sharp look, "stay invisible. I heard about last night." My stomach dropped. "What did you hear?" "That you somehow caught the Alpha King's attention. I don't know how, and I don't want to know how. But understand this. You are staff. They are guests. That line exists for a reason. Don't cross it." "I never intended to cross anything," I protested, but she'd already moved on to harangue another servant about silver polish. The Rose Garden Terrace was beautiful in the morning light, with climbing flowers and a view of the mountains that made the whole scene look like a painting. Long tables had been set up, laden with breakfast foods that probably cost more than I earned in a month. The females were already gathering, dressed in their day finery, slightly less elaborate than last night's gowns, but still stunning. I moved among them with my serving tray, pouring tea and coffee, offering pastries. Their conversation washed over me in waves. "Did you see how he looked at the Western Alpha's daughter?" I swear there was interest there. No, he spent the most time talking to Lady Helena from the Eastern Pack. That's significant. You're both wrong. He barely looked at anyone. Honestly, it's like he's not even interested in finding a mate. I kept my expression neutral, my movements efficient, but I couldn't help noticing how they watched each other, eyes cataloging every interaction, every perceived advantage or slight. The competition here was fierce, feral in a way that had nothing to do with wolf nature and everything to do with ambition. "You there. Girl." I turned to find the crimson-dressed female from last night, Lady Sienna, I'd learned her name was, beckoning me with one elegant hand. Up close, she was even more beautiful, with flawless golden skin and eyes like honey. "Yes, my lady. This tea is cold. Bring me a fresh pot. And make sure it's actually hot this time." The tea wasn't cold. I'd poured it less than a minute ago, but I nodded and headed back toward the service entrance, biting back the response that wanted to escape. "Ignore her," a voice said as I entered the corridor. "She's been in a foul mood since last night's reprimand." I turned to find another female from the ceremony, smaller than the others, with auburn hair and kind brown eyes. She wore a simple blue dress that suggested middling rank, not alpha stock. "I'm sorry," I said carefully. "Lady Sienna, she's taking her frustration out on the staff. It's not personal." The female smiled, and it reached her eyes. "I'm Zara, by the way. Western Pack, Beta bloodline. And you're Mira, the girl who reorganized the wine cellar." My surprise must have shown because she laughed softly. "Small castle. Word travels. Plus, I've been coming here for political visits since I was 16. I remember when you first arrived, you looked terrified." "I was terrified," I admitted, before I could think better of it. "But you stayed. That takes courage." Zara glanced back at the terrace. "Unlike some people who mistake cruelty for strength. Don't let Sienna get to you. She's desperate. Because she knows her pack needs this alliance more than the Alpha King needs her." I didn't know what to say to that. Political maneuvering was so far outside my experience that it might as well have been a foreign language. "Can I ask you something?" Zara's voice dropped lower. "Last night, during the opening ceremony, why weren't you affected? I was halfway across the room and I could barely think straight from his presence. But you just kept serving drinks like nothing was happening. Not this again." I swallowed hard. "I don't know. Maybe I'm just built differently." "Maybe," Zara agreed. But her expression said she was thinking something else entirely. "Or maybe you're exactly what he needs." Before I could ask what she meant, she headed back to the terrace, leaving me standing in the corridor with more questions than answers. The day continued in a blur of service. Lunch on the terrace, afternoon tea in the garden, dinner in the formal dining hall. I caught glimpses of Damon throughout. Always surrounded by females, always wearing that same carefully neutral expression. He looked exhausted, though he hid it well. It wasn't until evening, when I was cleaning up after dinner, that everything changed. I was alone in one of the smaller dining rooms, collecting abandoned glasses and plates, when the door opened. I didn't look up, assuming it was another servant coming to help. "You're working late." My hands stilled on the glass I was holding. That voice. Deep, commanding, unmistakable. I turned slowly to find Damon standing in the doorway, still dressed in his formal attire but with his jacket removed and his sleeves rolled up. He looked more human like this, less like an untouchable king, and more like a man who'd survived a very long day. "Your Majesty," I said, setting down the glass and executing a proper curtsy. "I didn't expect... that is, I'm just finishing..." "Stop." He moved into the room, closing the door behind him. "You don't have to do that with me." "Do what?" "Stumble over your words. Act like I'm going to bite." A pause. "Are you afraid of me, Mira?" The question hung in the air between us. I should have said yes. Any sane person would have said yes. He was the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the territories, a man who could end my employment or my life with a single word. But lying to him felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not afraid of you." Something flickered in his eyes, that same relief I'd seen last night. He moved closer, and I forced myself to hold my ground even though every instinct I possessed was screaming conflicting messages. Submit, run, stay, fight. "Why?" he asked, echoing his question from last night. "Why don't you feel what they feel?" "I don't know. I've never known. I thought maybe..." I trailed off, not wanting to voice the fear that had haunted me for years. "You thought maybe you were broken," he finished for me. "That's what you said last night." "Yes." "What if you're not?" He was close enough now that I could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, could smell the cedar and smoke scent of him. "What if everyone else is responding to a biological imperative, and you're the only one seeing clearly?" I blinked, not understanding. "I don't... They want me because their wolves tell them to. Because I'm the strongest alpha, the best genetic match, the most advantageous political alliance. But you..." He raised one hand, and I thought he might touch my face. But he stopped just short. "You look at me and see a person, just a person. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" "You're not just a person," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're the Alpha King. Right now, in this room, I'm just Damon, and you're just Mira. And for the first time in a week, I can breathe without feeling like I'm drowning in expectations." The vulnerability in his voice did something strange to my chest. This close, I could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the weight he carried that had nothing to do with physical strength. "Why are you here?" I asked. "In this room, talking to a servant, when you have dozens of beautiful, accomplished females waiting for your attention?" "Because I can't stand another minute of performance, another smile that doesn't reach their eyes, another perfectly rehearsed conversation about pack alliances and bloodlines." He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "Because you're the only person in this entire castle who isn't trying to be what they think I want. Maybe I just don't know what you want. Maybe that's exactly why I'm here." The moment stretched between us, charged with something I didn't have a name for. Not attraction, or at least, not the overwhelming chemical pull that other females described. This was different, quieter, like recognition. Like finding something you didn't know you'd been searching for. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Ezra's voice came from the other side. "Damon, the Eastern delegation wants to speak with you about the trade agreements." Damon closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, the vulnerability was gone, replaced by the mask of the Alpha King. "I'll be there in a moment." He looked at me one more time, his gaze searching my face for something. "This conversation isn't over, Mira." And then he was gone, leaving me alone with a tray of dirty dishes and a heart that was finally, treacherously, beginning to beat faster. 3 days passed in a strange sort of limbo. The ceremony continued its choreographed dance, group outings to the lake, formal dinners, evening entertainments where the females showcased various talents. I watched from the periphery, serving and clearing, invisible to everyone except the one person whose attention I desperately wanted to avoid and simultaneously craved. Damon's eyes found me constantly. Across crowded rooms, through windows, in corridors when I thought I was alone. We didn't speak again, but the weight of that conversation in the dining room hung between us like an unfinished sentence. The other females noticed, of course. How could they not? On the 4th morning, I arrived in the kitchen to find my workstation sabotaged. Wine spilled across clean linens, broken glass hidden in the towels I'd need to handle. Nothing provable, nothing I could report. But the message was clear. Clumsy today, aren't we? Lady Sienna's voice dripped false sympathy as she passed through the service corridor, flanked by 2 of her ladies-in-waiting. She smiled at me, all teeth and venom. Do be more careful, darling. Accidents can be so unfortunate. I cleaned up the mess in silence, my hands shaking with anger I couldn't express. Greta found me 20 minutes later, covered in wine and fighting tears of frustration. What happened? She demanded. I dropped some bottles, I lied. Because what else could I say? That I was being targeted by a noble female who saw me as competition for a position I didn't even want. Except, that wasn't entirely true anymore, was it? Somewhere in the past few days, something had shifted. I still didn't feel the overwhelming biological pull that other females described, but I'd started noticing other things. The way Damon's shoulders relaxed slightly when he spotted me in a room, the rare, genuine smile that crossed his face when our eyes met, the intelligence in his gaze when he listened to his advisors, really listened, weighing every word before speaking. I was starting to see the man beneath the crown, and that was far more dangerous than any chemical attraction. Zara found me later that afternoon in the laundry rooms, where I'd been reassigned after the morning's incident. They're getting worse, she said without preamble, settling onto a stool beside the washing tubs. The nobles. Some of the alpha females are forming alliances, trying to eliminate competition. It's turning vicious. Why are you telling me this? I scrubbed at a particularly stubborn stain, not meeting her eyes. Because you need to know what you're walking into. Sienna isn't the only one who's noticed the Alpha King's attention toward you. There are whispers spreading through the guest wing. My hands stilled in the soapy water. What kind of whispers? That you're using some kind of magic to influence him. That you're a spy from a rival pack. That you're pregnant with someone else's child and trying to pass it off as royal. Zara's voice was gentle but firm. None of it's true, obviously. But truth doesn't matter when fear and jealousy are in play. This is insane. I'm a servant. I have no power, no influence, no... You have his attention. In this place, right now, that's the only power that matters. I pulled my hands from the water, drying them on my apron with jerky, frustrated movements. I never asked for this. I don't even understand why, don't you? Zara interrupted. Mira, I've been watching the 2 of you. The way he looks at you isn't like how he looks at us. With the nobles, there's duty, calculation. But with you, there's something real there, something human. He's the Alpha King. I'm nobody. Even if there was something, which there isn't, it could never work. The council would never allow it. The packs would revolt, and yet stranger things have happened in wolf history. Zara stood, smoothing her skirts. I'm not saying you should pursue him. I'm just saying, be prepared. Because whether you want this or not, it's coming. That evening's entertainment was a musical performance in the grand ballroom. I was assigned to the upper balcony, serving drinks to the nobles who preferred watching from above rather than joining the crowd below. From this vantage point, I had a clear view of the entire room. Damon sat in the center of the main floor, flanked by the most prominent female candidates. Lady Sienna had claimed the seat to his right, while a striking female named Celeste from the Northern Pack occupied his left. Both were beautiful, accomplished, politically connected, everything a queen should be, but Damon looked miserable. Oh, he hid it well. To anyone who didn't know better, he simply appeared attentive, occasionally nodding or offering quiet comments. But I'd learned to read the subtle signs. The tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched when Sienna touched his arm, the careful distance he maintained even while appearing engaged. The performance began, a string quartet playing something classical and haunting. I should have been focusing on refilling glasses, but I couldn't look away from the scene below. Halfway through the second piece, Damon's gaze lifted to the balcony. To me. Our eyes locked across the distance, and even from here, I could feel the intensity of that connection. It was like a physical touch, a question without words. Then Sienna leaned in, whispering something in his ear, and the moment shattered. He turned his attention back to her with visible effort, his expression carefully neutral once more. I fled to the balcony's service corridor, my heart pounding. This was madness. I needed to stop this, Whatever this was, before it spiraled beyond control. Tomorrow, I would request a transfer to a different part of the castle, somewhere far from the ceremony and its politics. Running away won't help. I spun to find Ezra leaning against the wall, a glass of wine in his hand. In the dim corridor light, his amber eyes glowed like a cat's. "I'm not running," I said, but even I could hear the lie in my voice. "Yes, you are. And I understand why." He took a sip of wine, studying me over the rim. "But you should know. Daemon is going to announce his choice in 3 days. The final ceremony is set for the full moon." 3 days? My stomach dropped. Then this will all be over soon. Will it? Ezra pushed off from the wall, moving closer. "Mira, I'm going to tell you something that could get me in serious trouble. Daemon hasn't shown genuine interest in any of the noble females. Not one. He's been going through the motions because he has to, because the kingdom expects it, but there's no real connection there. That's not my concern. Except with you, there is a real connection. I've known him for 15 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Ezra's voice dropped lower. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "Nothing. I'm going to do nothing, because there's nothing to be done. He's a king, I'm a servant, and this is a fantasy that can only end badly for everyone involved. And if he chooses you anyway?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I shook my head, backing away. "He won't. He can't. It would be political suicide. Or it would be the bravest thing he's ever done." Ezra's smile was sad. "Not everyone gets to choose love, Mira. Most of us spend our whole lives compromising, settling, doing what's expected. If you have a chance at something real, even if it's complicated and dangerous and entirely impractical, isn't that worth fighting for?" Before I could answer, shouts erupted from the ballroom. Both Ezra and I rushed back to the balcony to see chaos erupting below. 2 females were in the center of the room, shifted partially, their wolves visible in their eyes and elongated claws. One was Celeste from the northern pack. The other was a female I didn't recognize, dark-haired, pale-skinned, radiating aggression. "You dare question my bloodline?" Celeste snarled, her voice carrying the resonance of her wolf. "My family has ruled the northern territories for 300 years. And my family has dragon blood in our veins," the dark-haired female shot back. "Pure shifter lineage going back to the old times. Your pack is nothing but mongrels playing at nobility." The insult hung in the air for a moment before violence erupted. Celeste lunged, claws extended, and the other female met her with equal fury. Around them, other females screamed and scattered. Some of the males moved to intervene, but the 2 combatants were fully committed now, their wolves too close to the surface to hear reason. Daemon was on his feet instantly, his power rolling out in a wave that made every wolf in the room snap to attention. "Enough!" The command was absolute, backed by an alpha authority that couldn't be denied. Both females froze mid-strike, their wolves whimpering in immediate submission. They dropped to their knees, heads bowed, unable to resist the compulsion in his voice. "You forget yourselves," Daemon said, and his voice was cold enough to freeze fire. "This ceremony is about honor, about tradition, about finding a queen worthy of ruling beside me. What you've just displayed is neither honorable nor worthy. You're both dismissed. Pack your belongings and leave the castle by dawn." "But Alpha King," Celeste started, her voice breaking. "Dawn," he repeated, and there was no mercy in his tone. "Consider yourselves fortunate I'm not banishing your entire packs for this display." Both females stumbled to their feet and fled, their shame palpable. The rest of the room remained frozen, shocked by the sudden violence and swift punishment. Daemon's gaze swept the remaining females, and I saw several flinch under the weight of it. "Let this be clear to everyone present. I will not tolerate aggression among the candidates. This ceremony continues because tradition demands it, but make no mistake, I choose my own path. No amount of posturing or politics will influence that choice." He turned and strode from the ballroom, his exit leaving a vacuum of tension in his wake. Slowly, conversation resumed, but the festive atmosphere was thoroughly shattered. I stood on the balcony, my hands gripping the railing, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. That power, that absolute authority, it should have terrified me, should have triggered every submission instinct I possessed. Instead, I felt something else entirely. Respect, admiration, understanding. because I'd seen what no one else seemed to notice. In the moment before he'd delivered his judgment, his eyes had found me on the balcony, and in them, I'd seen not anger, but weariness, not dominance, but desperation. He was a man drowning in expectations, searching for something authentic in a sea of performance. And somehow, impossibly, he thought he'd found it in me. The next morning brought changes. 8 more females departed voluntarily, deciding they'd rather leave with dignity than risk elimination. The remaining candidates numbered just 15, still too many, but at least the castle felt less like a battlefield. I was in the gardens, collecting herbs for the kitchen, when I heard footsteps on the gravel path behind me. "We need to talk." I turned to find Damon standing there, dressed simply in dark trousers and a white shirt, no crown or formal regalia. He looked younger like this, more approachable, though his presence still commanded attention. "Your Majesty, I don't think—" "Damon," he interrupted. "When we're alone, it's just Damon." "That's not appropriate. Nothing about this situation is appropriate." He moved closer, and I found myself backing against the garden wall with nowhere to go. "Do you know what happened last night after I left the ballroom?" I shook my head mutely. "I went to my chambers and I sat in the dark for 2 hours, trying to figure out how I've ended up here. Surrounded by dozens of females who want to be queen, and the only person I want to talk to is the one who wants nothing to do with me." "That's not true," I said before I could stop myself. "I don't. It's not that I want nothing to do with you. It's that I can't want anything to do with you." "Do you understand the difference?" "No." "Explain it to me." I took a breath, trying to organize thoughts that felt like scattered leaves in a storm. "You're the Alpha King. I'm a servant with no family, no pack, no prospects. Even if there was something between us, which I'm not saying there is, it could never work. Your council would revolt, the noble packs would consider it an insult, and I would spend every day of my life being reminded that I'm not good enough, that I don't belong, that I'm just a low-born girl who got lucky. What if I don't care what the council thinks? But you should care. You have responsibilities, duties, a kingdom that depends on you making the right choices. And what if you're the right choice?" The question stole my breath. He was close enough now that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, could see the silver flecks in his storm-gray eyes. "I'm not," I whispered. "I can't be." "Why? Because you don't feel the biological pull that other females feel? Mira, that's exactly why you might be perfect. Every other woman here wants me for what I represent. Power, status, genetics. But you see me. Just me. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How valuable? I'm not valuable. I'm broken, remember? Something's wrong with me that I don't respond the way I should. Nothing is wrong with you." His hand came up, and this time he did touch my face, his fingers gentle against my cheek. "You're the only thing in this entire castle that feels right." My heart was hammering now, my carefully constructed walls crumbling. This is insane. We barely know each other. You can't make a decision like this based on a few conversations. Then let's have more conversations. Let me know you. Let me prove that this isn't madness, it's possibility. In 3 days, you have to announce your choice. Then we have 3 days. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, and the tenderness of the gesture made my throat tight. "Unless you're telling me you feel nothing. Look me in the eye and tell me you feel nothing, and I'll walk away right now." I opened my mouth to do exactly that, to end this before it could truly begin, but the lie wouldn't come. Because I did feel something, not the overwhelming chemical pull of a mate bond, but something quieter and deeper: recognition, understanding. The sense that this person, this impossible, complicated, powerful person, somehow saw the real me and wasn't afraid of what he found. "I can't," I finally said, my voice barely audible. "I can't tell you I feel nothing." His smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "Then give me 3 days. That's all I ask. 3 days to know you, to prove this could work. And when it doesn't? When reality intrudes and you realize how impossible this is? Then at least we'll know we tried." He stepped back, giving me space to breathe, to think. "Meet me tonight. Midnight, in the old library. No servants, no nobles, no ceremony. Just you and me, talking. That's all. Can you do that?" Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was a mistake, that I should refuse, that nothing good could come from this, but my heart, my treacherous, hopeful heart, was already answering before my mind could catch up. "Yes," I said, "I'll be there." The old library was in the castle's west wing, a forgotten space that had been replaced by a more modern collection years ago. I'd only been there once, to retrieve some ancient texts for cataloging, and I remembered it as dusty and abandoned, filled with the musty scent of aging paper and neglect. When I pushed open the heavy door at midnight, I found it transformed. Someone, Damon I assumed, had lit dozens of candles throughout the space, their warm glow turning the forgotten room into something magical. The dust had been cleared, a fire crackled in the hearth, and 2 comfortable chairs sat angled toward each other near the warmth. "You came," Damon said, emerging from between the shelves. He'd changed into casual clothes, worn jeans and a soft sweater that made him look less like a king and more like someone I might have known in another life. I said I would. I closed the door behind me, suddenly nervous in a way I hadn't been before. This felt intimate in a way our previous encounters hadn't. No crowds to hide in, no duties to interrupt, just the 2 of us, and the truth hanging between us. "Sit," he invited, gesturing to the chairs. "I brought wine, but I wasn't sure if you drank, so there's also tea, and I may have raided the kitchens for those little pastries you were serving yesterday. The ones with the raspberry filling. The thoughtfulness of it caught me off guard." "You noticed what I was serving? I notice everything about you, Mira. It's becoming a problem." He poured tea into delicate cups, his large hands surprisingly gentle with the fragile porcelain. "Cream? Sugar? Just cream, please." We settled into the chairs, and for a moment, silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable exactly, but charged with the weight of everything unspoken. "Tell me about your mother," Damon said finally. "You mentioned she passed 3 years ago?" I hadn't expected that question. "Yes. Fever took her in the winter. She was a seamstress, worked for one of the noble houses in the Southern Territories. We weren't wealthy, but we were happy." My fingers traced the rim of my teacup. "She used to say I was born under a strange moon, that I'd always walk a different path than others expected. She sounds wise. She was. Though I'm not sure she'd be pleased with where that different path has led me. Serving in a castle while the Alpha King holds a mating ceremony. Why did you come here? To the castle? Debt." The word came out more bitter than I intended. My mother borrowed money for medicine when she first got sick. When she died, the debt became mine. Working here was the only way to pay it off. "And have you? Paid it off?" I shook my head. "Not yet. Another year, maybe 2, and I'll be free to leave." "And then what? What do you want, Mira, when you're free?" No one had ever asked me that before. I stared into the fire, watching flames dance across the logs, considering the question seriously for the first time in years. "I want a small house," I said slowly. "Somewhere quiet, with a garden. I want to grow my own vegetables and herbs, maybe keep a few chickens. I want to read books in the evening and not be afraid of making mistakes or disappointing anyone. I trailed off, embarrassed by how simple it sounded. "Peace," Damon finished softly. "You want peace?" "Yes. Boring, isn't it? Compared to ruling kingdoms and commanding packs. It's the most honest thing anyone has said to me in months." He set down his cup, leaning forward. "Do you know what I want?" I shook my head. "The same thing. A quiet evening. A real conversation. Someone who doesn't expect me to be performing every moment." His voice carried a weariness that made my chest ache. "I became Alpha King at 23 when my father died unexpectedly. I've spent the last 7 years learning how to be what everyone needs me to be. But somewhere in all that learning, I forgot how to just be." "You're doing it now," I pointed out. "Being. Just sitting here, talking. Only with you. You're the first person in years who's made me feel like I could stop performing." He reached across the space between our chairs, his hand extended palm up. An invitation, not a demand. That's worth more than any political alliance or perfect bloodline. I stared at his hand for a long moment before slowly placing mine in it. His fingers closed around mine, warm and solid. And that quiet recognition I'd felt before deepened into something more. "Tell me about the ceremony," I said. "What happens in the next 3 days?" Tomorrow, there's a hunt. Traditional display of strength and coordination. The females compete in wolf form while I observe. The day after, there's a formal dinner where each remaining candidate makes their case for why they should be queen. And then the final day, he paused, his thumb brushing across my knuckles. The final day, I announce my choice at the full moon ceremony, and you're expected to choose one of the noble females. The council has made their preferences very clear. Lady Sienna would bring a strong alliance with the Southern Territories. Helena from the east has military connections that would strengthen our borders. Zara, though not as highly ranked, has a reputation for diplomacy that could be valuable. Zara's kind, I said. She's been warning me about the others, trying to protect me. I know. She's one of the few genuine people here. Damon's eyes met mine, but I don't feel this with her, or with any of them. This, I repeated softly. What is this, exactly? I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out. He stood, drawing me up with him, but didn't release my hand. Dance with me. There's no music. Then we'll make our own. It was absurd and impractical and completely inappropriate, but I found myself stepping into his arms anyway. He was warm and solid against me, one hand at my waist, the other still holding mine. We swayed to a rhythm only we could hear, moving slowly in the candlelight. You're trembling, he murmured against my hair. I'm terrified, I admitted. Of this. Of what it could mean. Of how it could end. I'm terrified too. His arms tightened around me, but I'm more afraid of letting you go without knowing what we could be. We danced in silence for several minutes, and gradually, my trembling eased. There was something hypnotic about the movement, about the warmth of his body, and the steady beat of his heart under my ear. Can I tell you something? I said finally. About why I might not feel what other females feel. Anything. My mother once said that our family line had magic in it, generations back. Nothing powerful. We were never witches or seers. But she said we had a resistance to compulsion, to having our wills bent by others. She thought maybe that's why I always felt different. Why I never quite fit the mold of what a wolf should be. Damon pulled back enough to look at my face. And you think that's why you're not affected by my alpha presence? Maybe. Or maybe I really am just broken. I tried to smile, but it felt shaky. Either way, it means I see you clearly. Not through the filter of biology or pack instincts, but as you actually are. And what do you see? I took a breath, deciding to be completely honest. I see someone who's lonely, someone who carries the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders and has no one to share that burden with. Someone who's kind even when he doesn't have to be. Who notices details about servants and remembers what they serve. Someone who's terrified of making the wrong choice, but even more terrified of living a life that feels like a lie. His hand came up to cup my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. You see me, he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. God help me, Mira, you actually see me. The moment stretched between us, charged with possibility. He was going to kiss me. I could see the intention in his eyes, feel it in the way his hand trembled slightly against my skin. And I was going to let him. Consequences be damned. Then a crash echoed through the castle, followed by screams. We broke apart instantly, both of us turning toward the door. Another crash, closer this time, and the unmistakable sound of fighting. Snarls, breaking furniture, violent struggle. Damon was moving before I could process what was happening, throwing open the library door and striding into the corridor. I followed without thinking, my heart pounding. The main hall was chaos. 2 wolves were locked in combat. One silver, one black, their fangs bared and claws tearing into each other with savage intensity. Around them, nobles scattered and screamed, while castle guards tried unsuccessfully to intervene. Stop! Damon's command boomed through the hall, backed by enough alpha power to make the windows rattle. Both wolves froze, then slowly separated, their forms flickering as they struggled between human and animal. The silver wolf resolved into Lady Sienna, her expensive gown torn and bloody. The black wolf became Helena from the eastern pack, her face a mask of rage and pain. What is the meaning of this? Damon's voice was deadly quiet now, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd shouted. She attacked me, Sienna spat, blood running from a gash on her shoulder, accused me of sabotaging her room, destroying her belongings. Because you did, Helena shot back, I have witnesses who saw your servants leaving my chambers. You've been trying to eliminate competition since the ceremony began. Lies. You're just desperate because you know the Alpha King would never choose someone as aggressive and uncontrolled as you. Enough, Daemon roared. And this time, the power behind the command drove both females to their knees. Around the hall, every wolf present felt the weight of it, even the human servants flinching from the sheer force of his authority. Ezra appeared at Daemon's side, breathing hard like he'd been running. The entire guest wing is in chaos. 4 more fights have broken out. The ceremony is falling apart. Daemon stood there for a long moment, his jaw clenched, hands fisted at his sides. I watched him struggle with something internal, saw the moment he made a decision that would change everything. The ceremony is over, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. All candidates will leave the castle by tomorrow evening. There will be no hunt, no final dinner, no announcement at the full moon. Shocked silence greeted his words. Lady Sienna found her voice first. But Alpha King, you haven't chosen. I have chosen. His eyes swept the room, touching on each noble female before finally landing on me where I stood half hidden in the corridor shadows. I choose honesty over performance, peace over politics, truth over tradition. He was looking at me. Everyone was looking at me now, following his gaze to where I stood frozen, my servant's uniform marking me as impossibly wrong for this moment. No, I whispered, but the word was lost in the sudden explosion of voices. A servant? Someone shrieked. He's choosing a servant over us? This is an outrage. The council will never allow it. She must have used magic, some kind of enchantment. Silence. Daemon's roar cut through the chaos. I am your Alpha King, and I will make my own choice. The ceremony is concluded. You are dismissed. The nobles erupted into fresh chaos, some fleeing in tears, others clustering together in outraged groups, a few looking at me with expressions that promised violence if given the chance. Castle guards moved to restore order, ushering people toward their rooms. Through it all, Daemon walked steadily toward me, his eyes never leaving mine. When he reached me, he extended his hand again. But this time it wasn't a private invitation in a candlelit library. This was a public claim, witnessed by nobles and servants alike. Come with me, he said quietly. And it wasn't a command. It was a plea. I stared at his hand, my mind reeling. This was insane. Impossible. Political suicide. The council would revolt. The noble Pax would be insulted. His entire kingdom would question his judgment. I should refuse. I should run back to the servants' quarters and hide until this storm passed. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw the same thing I'd seen in the library. Loneliness. Hope. Desperate honesty. He was choosing me not despite my ordinariness, but because of it. Because I saw him as a person, not a prize. Because together, we might build something real in a world of performance. My hand was shaking when I placed it in his. The gasps that echoed through the hall should have made me reconsider. The hate in Lady Sienna's eyes should have warned me of consequences to come. The sheer impossibility of what we were attempting should have sent me running. But Daemon's fingers closed around mine with such gentle certainty that all the fear and doubt quieted to a whisper. Are you sure? I asked, my voice barely audible. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He drew me closer, his other hand coming up to frame my face. If you'll have me. Not the Alpha King, not the crown or the kingdom or any of it. Just me. Just Daemon. Around us, the world was falling apart. Nobles raging, servants whispering, guards struggling to maintain order. The consequences of this choice would echo for years to come. There would be battles to fight, prejudices to overcome, 1,000 obstacles between this moment and any kind of happy ending. But looking into his storm-gray eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand in mine, I realized something crucial. Maybe I wasn't broken after all. Maybe my inability to feel that overwhelming biological pull was a gift, allowing me to see clearly when everyone else was blinded by instinct. And what I saw was a man worth fighting for. Yes, I said, and the word felt like jumping off a cliff. Yes, I'll have you. His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds, transforming his entire face. And then, right there in the middle of the chaotic hall with dozens of witnesses, he kissed me. It wasn't the overwhelming, world-ending kiss that romance stories promised. It was softer than that, sweeter. A question and an answer, a promise and a beginning. His lips were gentle against mine, his hand cradling my face like I was something precious. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. When we finally broke apart, the hall had gone silent. Every eye was on us, expressions ranging from shock to fury to, surprisingly, a few that held something like approval. Zara stood near the back, a small smile on her face. Ezra watched from the stairs, his expression unreadable but not hostile. "We should go," Damon murmured against my forehead. "Before they recover from the shock and the real arguing begins." He was right. I could see some of the nobles regaining their composure, preparing fresh protests. But before anyone could speak, Damon turned to address the room one final time. "This is not a decision I've made lightly. I know it breaks with tradition, challenges expectations, and will face opposition. But I am still your Alpha King, and this is my choice. Anyone who cannot accept it knows where the door is." Then he swept me from the hall, his hand never releasing mine, leaving chaos and consequence in our wake. The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of consequences and confrontations. The castle emptied quickly. Most of the noble females departed within hours of Damon's announcement, their pride too wounded to remain. Lady Sienna left without a word, but the look she gave me promised this wasn't over. Helena surprised me by offering a stiff nod of acknowledgement before climbing into her carriage. Respect, perhaps, for disrupting a system she'd never truly fit into either. Zara was one of the last to leave. She found me in the gardens on the second morning, while I was trying to process everything that had happened. "I wanted to say goodbye," she said, settling beside me on the stone bench. "And congratulations, though I suspect that word feels strange right now. Everything feels strange right now." I pulled my shawl tighter around my shoulders. I keep waiting to wake up and find this was all a dream. It's not a dream. Though the reality is going to be complicated. Zara's expression turned serious. "The council is furious. 3 of the elder alphas have demanded an emergency meeting. There's talk of challenging Damon's authority, claiming he's unfit to rule if he can't even follow basic protocol for choosing a mate." My stomach clenched. Maybe I should leave, if my presence is causing this much trouble. "No." Zara's hand caught mine, surprisingly strong. "That's exactly what they want, for you to doubt yourself, to run away, to prove their prejudices right. Don't give them that satisfaction." She squeezed my fingers. "You know what I noticed during the ceremony?" Damon smiled more in the few moments he spent looking at you than in all the hours he spent with us. "That's worth something. That's worth fighting for." After she left, I spent long hours walking the castle grounds, trying to understand how my life had transformed so completely in just a few days. I'd gone from invisible servant to the Alpha King's chosen mate, a position I had no training for, no preparation for, no right to hold by any traditional measure. The servants treated me differently now. Some with resentment, others with cautious respect. Greta avoided me entirely, perhaps unsure how to reconcile the girl she'd ordered around with someone who now technically outranked her. The only person who acted completely normally was Ezra. He found me on the 3rd afternoon in the old library, where I'd been hiding from the whispers and stares. "The council meeting is tonight," he announced without preamble. "They're going to push hard for Damon to reconsider. Claim that choosing a servant undermines the entire pack hierarchy. And will he reconsider?" The question hurt to ask, but I needed to know. Ezra's amber eyes studied me thoughtfully. "Damon is the most stubborn wolf I've ever known. Once he makes a decision, he doesn't back down." He paused. "But I'm not here to talk about Damon. I'm here to talk about you." "Me?" "You need to understand what you're walking into. Being the Alpha King's mate isn't just about love or attraction. It's a political position, a symbol, a target. You'll be scrutinized, criticized, challenged at every turn. People will look for reasons to prove you're unworthy." His voice softened. "The question is, are you strong enough to withstand that?" I thought about my mother, who'd worked herself to exhaustion to give me a better life, about the 3 years I'd spent in this castle, invisible but observant, learning the rhythms of power and politics from the shadows, about the strange resistance in my blood that let me see clearly when others were blinded by instinct. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," I admitted, "but I know I'm not going to run away." Ezra smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "Good. Because Damon needs someone who won't break under pressure. The kingdom needs that too, even if they don't realize it yet." He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think he made the right choice. You see him as a person, not a position. That's rarer and more valuable than any political alliance. That evening, I dressed carefully in one of the simple gowns that had been provided. Nothing elaborate, but clean and well-made. Damon had asked me to attend the council meeting, and though every instinct screamed at me to hide, I refused to let fear rule me. The council chamber was intimidating, a circular room with high ceilings and stone walls, where 10 elder alphas sat in a semicircle facing the Alpha King's throne. I entered behind Damon, keeping my head high despite the hostile stares that greeted me. Gentlemen, Damon began, his voice calm but carrying absolute authority. I understand you have concerns about my choice of mate. Concerns? One of the elders, a silver-haired man with cold blue eyes, stood abruptly. Alpha King, with respect, this goes beyond concerns. You violated every tradition, ignored every protocol. A servant? A wolf with no pack ties, no bloodline, no political value? She has value to me, Damon said simply. That should be sufficient. It's not sufficient, another elder joined in, his face flushed with anger. The mating ceremony exists for a reason, to strengthen alliances, to unite powerful bloodlines, to ensure the stability of our territories. What you've done is spit in the face of that tradition. Or, Damon countered, I've reminded everyone that I am the Alpha King, and my choices are mine to make, even when those choices weaken the kingdom. The silver-haired elder's voice dripped disdain. What message does this send? That any servant can aspire to rule? That bloodlines and breeding mean nothing? You're undermining the very foundation of our society. I felt each word like a physical blow, but I forced myself to stand still, to meet their hostile gazes without flinching. This was what Ezra had warned me about. The scrutiny, the challenges, the constant questioning of my worth. Perhaps, I heard myself say, and the room went silent as every eye turned to me. The foundation needs undermining. The silver-haired elder's eyes narrowed. You dare speak in this chamber, girl? She is my chosen mate, Damon said quietly, dangerously. She has every right to speak. I took a breath, gathering courage from somewhere deep inside. You talk about bloodlines and breeding as if they're the only things that matter. But what about character? Compassion? The ability to see people as individuals rather than political pieces? My voice grew stronger. I'm not here because of my family name or my pack connections. I'm here because your Alpha King chose me for who I am, not what I represent. Maybe that's exactly what this kingdom needs. A reminder that worth isn't determined solely by birth. Idealistic nonsense, another elder scoffed. You have no idea what it takes to rule, to make the hard decisions, to navigate the complex politics of our world. You're right, I agreed, surprising them. I don't know any of that yet, but I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to work harder than anyone else to prove I deserve this position. And unlike the noble females at the ceremony, I'm not doing it for power or status. I'm doing it because I believe in him. I gestured toward Damon. I believe in the man behind the crown, the one who's been drowning in expectations and performance his entire life. Maybe what he needs isn't another political alliance. Maybe he needs someone who sees him as a person first and a king second. Silence greeted my words. Some of the elders looked thoughtful, others still hostile, but no one immediately argued. The silver-haired elder finally spoke, his voice weary. Alpha King, we cannot support this decision. The other territories will see it as weakness, an invitation to test your authority. We formally request that you reconsider. Request denied, Damon said, standing. I've heard your concerns, and I acknowledge the challenges ahead. But my choice stands. Mira will be my mate, and your queen. Those who cannot accept that are free to step down from this council. The threat hung in the air, crystal clear. Accept his decision, or lose your position. One by one, the elders nodded, though some with obvious reluctance. The silver-haired one was last, his jaw tight with disapproval. We will accept your choice, Alpha King, he said finally. But understand that she will be watched closely. Any mistake, any failure, any sign of weakness, and we will not hesitate to call for her removal. Then watch closely, Damon replied, and prepare to be surprised. The meeting ended with tense formality. As we left the chamber, I felt the weight of 10 pairs of eyes on my back, measuring, judging, waiting for me to fail. You were magnificent, Damon murmured once we were in the corridor, his hand finding mine. I was terrified. I admitted. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. He drew me into an alcove, his hands framing my face. Are you sure about this? It's not too late to change your mind. I would understand if... I silenced him with a kiss, pouring every ounce of certainty I possessed into the gesture. When we broke apart, I said, I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together now. The weeks that followed were challenging in ways I couldn't have imagined. News of Damon's choice spread through the territories, sparking debates, protests, and surprisingly, some support from unexpected quarters. Lower-ranked wolves saw my elevation as hope, proof that the rigid class structure could be challenged. The nobility, predictably, saw it as an insult. Damon assigned tutors to teach me everything I needed to know about ruling, politics, territory management, pack law. I studied from dawn until late into the night, desperate to prove I deserved the position thrust upon me. Some tutors were patient, others deliberately difficult, testing me at every turn, but I had allies too. Ezra became an unexpected mentor, teaching me the subtle art of court politics. A few of the servants, led by a young woman named Clara, who'd once helped me in the kitchens, offered their support and friendship. And Zara sent letters from the Western Pack, filled with advice and encouragement. 2 months after the disastrous ceremony, Damon and I stood together on the castle balcony overlooking the main courtyard. Below, preparations were underway for our official mating ceremony, a much simpler affair than the elaborate event that had brought us together, but no less significant. Nervous? Damon asked, his arm around my waist. Terrified, I admitted, but also excited. Is that strange? It's perfect, just like you. He kissed my temple. I've been thinking about what you said in the council chamber, about undermining the foundation. Did I cause trouble with that? No. You caused something better. Conversation. Questions. 3 of the smaller packs have petitioned for reforms to the hierarchy system, citing your elevation as precedent. He turned me to face him, his storm gray eyes bright with something that looked like pride. You're changing things, Mira, just by being yourself, by refusing to accept that birth determines worth. That's power the nobles never counted on. I'm just trying not to mess up. You're doing more than that. You're showing them a different path. His thumb brushed across my cheek, in that familiar, gentle gesture. My brave, impossible, perfect mate. The ceremony that evening was intimate. Just the essential witnesses, the traditional vows, the binding ritual that would mark us as mates for life. I wore a simple white dress that Clara had helped me alter, with pale flowers woven into my blonde hair. When Damon took my hands in his beneath the full moon, his eyes held everything we'd been through. The chaos of the original ceremony, the impossible choice, the weeks of struggle and triumph that had followed. I, Damon Silvercrest, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, take you, Mira, as my mate, my partner, my queen, he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Not because tradition demands it, not because politics require it, but because my heart chose you. Because you see me when others only see the crown. Because together, we are stronger than we ever could be apart. My own vows came from deep within. Words I'd practiced, but that felt new and true in this moment. I, Mira, take you, Damon, as my mate, my partner, my king, not because of your power or your title, but because you chose honesty over performance, because you had the courage to follow your heart even when the world said it was impossible. I promise to stand beside you, to support you, to challenge you when needed, and to love you, not the Alpha King, but the man behind the crown. When we sealed the vows with a kiss, I felt something shift in the air around us, the mate bond clicking into place, not with overwhelming force, but with quiet certainty. It felt like coming home, like finding a missing piece I hadn't known I needed. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered genuinely, others offered polite applause that barely masked their disapproval. But I didn't care. Let them doubt. Let them judge. Damon and I would prove them wrong, one day at a time. 6 months later, I stood in the great hall that had once held the disastrous mating ceremony, but everything had changed. The room was full of wolves from every territory, gathered for the annual council summit. As Damon's queen, I now had a voice in these proceedings, a reality that still surprised me daily. The silver-haired elder who'd been my harshest critic approached after the formal sessions concluded. Queen Mira, he said, the title coming easier now than it had at first. I wanted to acknowledge I may have been hasty in my initial judgment. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? Your education reforms, allowing lower-ranked wolves access to advanced training regardless of bloodline, are showing remarkable results. 3 of our best new trackers came from servant families. He looked uncomfortable admitting it, but continued. And your work establishing the orphanage in the Eastern Territory has improved relations there more than decades of political maneuvering achieved. Thank you, I said simply, not gloating over his change of heart. I'm just trying to build a kingdom where worth is earned, not inherited. Yes, well, he cleared his throat. The council has voted to formally support your initiatives, unanimously. After he left, Damon appeared at my side, slipping his hand into mine. I heard. Unanimous support. That's quite an achievement. We did it together, I reminded him. Your backing gave me the authority to try. No, you earned that authority yourself. He drew me close, and even after 6 months, the comfort of his presence still felt new and precious. I chose well. We both did. That night, we walked through the gardens where we'd had so many crucial conversations. The moon was full again, casting silver light across the flowers and stone paths. Do you ever regret it? I asked quietly. Choosing me instead of a proper alliance? Damon stopped, turning to face me fully. Not once. Not ever. Do you regret accepting? I thought about everything that had happened. The challenges, the victories, the slow transformation from invisible servant to visible queen. About the orphans who now had hope, the lower-ranked wolves who could dream of better futures, the small but significant changes rippling through the kingdom. Most of all, I thought about the man beside me. No longer a lonely king drowning in expectations, but a partner who could finally breathe freely. No, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. No regrets. He kissed me under the moonlight, and in that moment, everything was perfect. Not because our path had been easy, or because all our problems were solved. There would always be challenges, always those who doubted us, but we had chosen each other, honestly and completely. We had built something real in a world of performance and politics. And together, we were changing the very foundation of what it meant to rule. I had started as the maid who didn't fall for the Alpha King at the mating ceremony. Now I was the queen who had fallen for the man beneath the crown, and in doing so, had helped him remember who he truly was. Years later, when young wolves asked me about the unconventional path that had led me to the throne, I would tell them this. True strength isn't about fighting against who you are. It's about embracing what makes you different and using it to build something better. I had been called broken for not feeling what others felt, but that supposed weakness had become our greatest strength. It had allowed me to see clearly, to choose with my heart instead of my instincts, to build a partnership based on truth rather than biology, and in the end, that made all the difference. Damon and I stood together in the garden, his arms around me, the future stretching before us bright with possibility. The mating ceremony that was supposed to give him a queen had given us both something far more valuable, each other, honestly and completely. We had taken the impossible path. We had challenged tradition, faced opposition, and rebuilt what it meant to rule. And we had won. Not because we were perfect, but because we were real. Not because it was easy, but because it was true. And in a world of performance and politics, of biological imperatives and pack hierarchies, that truth was the most revolutionary thing of all. The servant girl who stood invisible at the first ceremony had become the queen who made everyone see differently. And the lonely king who had been drowning in expectations had found someone to breathe with. Together, we had rewritten the story. And it was only the beginning.